Good afternoon, welcome to Tecman Talks Dynamics. I'm James Crowter, and with me I have a long-time colleague, Liam Walton, to discuss a little bit more about the world of dynamics and where it's going and what the future holds. Welcome, Liam.
Yeah, good to be with you again. Remotely again. Hopefully soon we'll be back in the same room. But
well, one of us is in the office today, but yeah, absolutely. It's the UK at least seems on the way to having this thing a little bit more under control. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, eh? And we've both been vaccinated, I think. So one day soon.
Halfway there. Got the first one in.
Yeah, it's been a funny year.
It has been a funny year. So today, you mentioned the topic that we're going to talk about, and although I've heard the phrase that we're going to use as the subject matter, which is this phrase, a citizen developer, I guess there's a lot of grey areas around that, or a lot of unknowns. What does that mean? And although I've got a rough idea, I'm sure you'll put me right, or how we see that in the dynamics world. But I mean, I've always seen a citizen developer is someone who's probably not trained in a programming language, so to speak. They probably understand the business, they understand how the application functions and what it can do, but they typically wouldn't be that person you would go to historically to write some custom code to make the system do something it doesn't do out the box. Is that correct, or is that halfway there?
Yeah, I mean, I was confused similarly probably 3 or 4 years ago now when I first heard the phrase. I think it's a phrase that Microsoft love, but the rest of us kind of struggle to understand. I think, the derogatory terms for it would be part-time developer or amateur developer. It's certainly probably somebody who's not a professional developer in that they're not a full-time developer. So it's somebody who does some development when they need to do some development rather than being something that they're specifically employed to do. And so we are seeing, Microsoft are right in one way. Perhaps they've picked a marketing term for the kind of way to describe it so that people don't get upset. But they are right in that there are more and more people involved in the process who are identifying a need from their systems and therefore are looking at how they can fill that need without necessarily writing tons and pages, days and days worth of code to create that solution.
Yeah, and so I guess from our point of view as a Dynamics partner, why is this of interest to the people that would normally tune in and listen to this podcast?
Well, I think it's about getting value from your dynamic system, and in the past, perhaps the option, if if your dynamic system didn't do it out of the box, you had two major options. You either paid a partner like ourselves with a bunch of professional developers to create that custom solution, and that that had an expensive price tag connected to it, or you created a disconnected system. The classic one is the list of information that we store in Microsoft Excel that you could put together but had no kind of integration with your core systems, and often the data could get mismatched. You could use different coding, it didn't all line up, etc. And you had to maintain it completely separately as well. So what you have got the option these days is kind of that halfway house. And that's where the citizen developer comes in, really. Because let's face it, professional developers, as demand goes up, are getting more and more expensive. The time and effort involved is considerable.
Yeah, indeed. So obviously we work with different sizes of different organisations. We typically, I'd say, a lot of organisations, not every organisation, but we have someone there who would probably be classed as the dynamics champion, the person that knows more than most people. And so would that hat normally fall onto someone along those lines? That's the type of role we're looking at, who understands their business, knows what the app can do, and there's probably got some skills that were going to be useful for what we're talking about here.
I think you certainly need some skills. The idea that, somebody can... maybe we'll get there where you can just wander up to a system and describe what you want and it builds it for you. That's not there. That's still fantasy land, unfortunately. Fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, I'd be out of a job, for instance. But no, that's not there. So you've got to, if you take dynamics, which is this is Tecman Talks Dynamics, so we ought to come back to that really. If you look at specifically our homeland in Business Central, you've probably got two ways of going about this. And the development platform for Business Central for years was Seaside. And that was something that, you were a good week's development course, full-time development course, before you even got started with that. It was a very unique environment that you got your badge in geekdom when you opened that on day 2. So that historically was full-time developers country. Microsoft discouraged, and Navision before them, discouraged people, end users, from developing that by, they put a 20,000 GBP price tag on the solution developer. They put a £4,500 solution tag on the application developer. Now in the new world, those aren't for sale anymore. Those are effectively scrap, because the development tools that I can use as a professional developer are available to everybody who wants them, right? So, and it is the case where, you need to fire up a piece of software called VS Code. That's free. You can just go download that. You add a couple of add-ins into that, and suddenly you're off and you're creating your own extensions. That might sound a complex, difficult thing to do, but actually, again, there's some extensions for VS Code, would you believe? Not extensions for Business Central, but these make VS Code much more usable. And one of them is a wizard tool that will allow you to go through and create, point and click to create a new page in Business Central on a table of information. So showing that through, I'd struggle to spend more than an hour showing somebody how to use that. They can go and create page extensions, new pages, and then publish them into their VS Code system. And you're probably talking half a day's training course to understand the capability of doing that. Now, I think that's going to happen a lot more in the future. When I look through some of the change requests that go through our customer services team, there's a lot of those small, almost cosmetic level changes that people come back to us to do it. Unless we bundle up a whole load of them together, it's quite an expensive process for us to do. So actually customers doing it themselves makes a lot more sense to me. So that's one level.
Okay, so generally you're getting a simplified way of doing some very basic changes to your system. So it's going to be more accessible to more people. Of course, as you mentioned, the licenses, that there's a big cost of entry, and you had to be serious about doing development if we're going to spend 20 grand on something, didn't you? So that's obviously been removed by Microsoft. So there's a general encouragement, and I guess IT simplification has been big on everything, hasn't it? Trying to make everything a little bit easier rather than this complex different languages that we've got. I'm not dumbing it down completely, but the basic side, like you said, cosmetic changes, adding new pages and bits and pieces like that.
Even a new table of information. So if you've got a new table of information that you want to hang off the back of your items or your customers, and you want to relate it, so you have to pick up a valid item number and it's not blocked and all the rest of it. So the data is almost self-maintaining, or the referential integrity, to use the correct word, the coding on one table is valid in another table, then that's very simple and very straightforward to do. And, I struggle to say anybody who operates, for instance, Excel couldn't learn to do that in certainly a day's course and be creating the first things. And so suddenly, that Excel spreadsheet that you had because you wanted to hold a bunch of information, you can build back into your core system and have it maintained, so somebody hasn't got to create that new item number in that Excel spreadsheet every time they create a new item number in Business Central, for instance. And to do that, that's very straightforward. Extensions mean it's zero risk, because if you put it in and it doesn't work, guess what? You can uninstall and take it straight out again. So again, you couldn't do that in the CAL world, where it was kind of knitted into the spaghetti and you couldn't identify what was whose. And I think we are seeing an increasing number of customers build their own extensions, and I think that will grow and should grow, because paying us to do simple stuff like that is not full value.
Okay, yeah, that makes complete sense. You said there we worked a long time together, and the phrase I've heard many times when we're talking to people is a little knowledge is dangerous, isn't it? So, but this, from what you said there, with the new world of extensions, or it's not so new now, but that new approach, it's not quite as risky as doing something that could really cause a problem. And I guess most people now have a test or
sandbox.
A system, a sandbox environment to try these things out before they put it in live or in production. So there's a lot of better ways or areas we can deliver this to test it and make sure that everything's right. And you've also mentioned a short training course to understand the fundamentals, to make sure you don't go and really make a mess of something, or just understanding what you're trying to do is obviously important still.
And this is one area where SaaS has a distinct advantage over the on-premise stroke PaaS world, with where you have the traditional licensing, the FLF licensing that we use in the on-prem PaaS world. You still have to buy objects. Okay, so if you want to create that new table, that's one table object from your pack of 10, and you're talking, I don't know precisely what the price is, but it's about 500 quid for 10, plus ongoing maintenance. So maintenance, 16% of that every year. That 20 grand had a 16% charge every year. So you had to keep using it to make it wash its face. In a SaaS world, the 50,000 to 100,000 range is free of charge. So you can go and create 2 or 3 tables to build a little kind of database of information to run, something specific within your business, maybe plant maintenance or some records keeping system. You can do that, and that can then be part of your, core system. And for instance, that if it was plant maintenance that you created records for, you could link that up to your fixed asset register so that you're picking up the correct piece of equipment and so on, and when you dispose of it, they can't log any further maintenance for it, and that's how it all kind of joins together in a much better way than having a separate system. Okay.
So you've talked about the language and the tools that we use normally in Business Central for development.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've heard Microsoft going on about, and for a few years now, is something they've termed as Power Apps. Which seems, having had a little play with it, and I'm definitely not a developer, but I had a little play with it. It's far more, I think they call it low code or no code. So it's a way of designing, I would say, simpler applications that will still be able to get data from some of the systems that we're used to and pass it around. More advanced than just workflow, but it's not, I don't need to know a development language to get involved with it. Is that again the type of tools we're talking about? Although we're moving away from Business Central specifically, we can interact with Business Central or Dynamics Customer Engagement, etc., and all the other Microsoft apps. Is that what Power Apps is, or how would you describe it?
100%. So I think Power Apps is they talk about low code, no code, but a lot of the time it's no code. You only have to write code when you go beyond a certain level. And so you can go into the Power Apps design environment and you can drag and drop different, what we call controls, boxes in effect, fields that you want to put on the page in a specific way. You can link, now it's quite simple. You can link up to the different APIs. Your Business Central, again, if we come back to that, that publishes now, you've got, I don't know what it's up to. The last version was up to, I think, 39 different APIs. So 39 different parts of the application that you could plug into. So there's a standard one for creating a customer. There's a standard one for creating a sales order. There's a standard one for creating a purchase order. There's a standard one for items. All the different major functions of the area, they've got these application programmer interfaces. So that kind of exposes, I wouldn't say every field, but a lot of the fields that you might populate if you went in and put the information through the front door of the application. But now with that application, you can fire up a Power App and point that Power App then at that API, the item API, and suddenly you've got a list of Business Central's items, maybe filtered down by ones which are, raw material items, for instance, whatever filter you want to apply to that. And then you can start to kind of do something with them or transact with them. You can feed back into a journal form. So, if you consume something, you could then update the journal to say, I've used this and so on. So building completely different kind of interfaces. Power Apps has one magical feature, which everybody loves, which is the ability to go offline. So once you've built your Power App, you can publish it to, for instance, your phone. And then if your phone is out of signal, it obviously can't talk to the API, but if it's pulled down a list of items, you could then record that. And then when it comes back in Rage, it can feed those back in. Now building that so it's completely slick, completely easy, you'll probably get to the point where you want, you'll want to do something specific. You'll want to make something conditional on something and do some checks or something, and you'll get to the point where actually it requires a bit of script in that, and that's where the low code comes in. So there are limitations about what you can do with no code, but typically you're not writing, this is not a low-level language where you're writing pages and pages of code. You're writing probably the equivalent of short little macros in Excel, the way that seemed to work if you've used that before, to build those out. But yeah, there's lots of kind of non-standard things that are not held within Business Central or customer engagement or whichever, that we're building Power Apps for now. And I think, increasingly, again, we'll see customers building their own Power Apps in the future for all sorts of functions across the business.
Yeah, during one of the lockdowns when we couldn't do anything, I remember playing with it one evening, and even I managed to get, what surprised me, and you mentioned this right at the beginning of that Power Apps discussion, was the library of templates and stuff to get you started. And I was just playing around with it, trying to create a mobile app for one of the events we did, so people could choose which topic they wanted to listen to and book on. Yeah. So it was almost like a something on your mobile to see what your schedule was if we were running a user day or something like that. And you're right, I found one quite quickly. I was able to change that, customize it a little bit. I did hit a limit, so I would have needed some help or some level of coding. But you're right, there was such a wealth of ready-made templates and a foundation things to get you up and running. It was quite easy to get to a point where I felt I was probably better than I actually was. But it was great that it was on a mobile device. I did it on my laptop, but like you said, port the URL and open it up on my phone, and it was just working great. So that was really interesting. So I know I was just going to say we've had a few developers who've written things, as you said, Power Apps for customers, so they can go offline, they can go off site, and gather that information or get the information they need while they're away from the office, and then it connects back up and updates the system when they're either back on Wi-Fi or back on a signal. So it has been useful for that.
So Power Apps now from Business Central 18, the Wave 1 release this year, can talk to custom API in Business Central. So what does that mean? It means even if there's not a standard API for it to connect to, there's not an out-of-the-box one from Microsoft, you could use VS Code, you could create your API, and yes, you could do that via one of the plugin wizards that goes kind of tick this box, tick this box, tick this box. It kind of walks you through, publish that into your Business Central system. And then connect your Power App to that. So there is now, you are minutes from exposing anything within Business Central to being available to read or update via a Power App. And, that is a little bit of a game changer. For me, it realizes the full potential of Power Apps. The number of Power Apps since that capability came in that we're now specifying as part of a project when we're implementing Business Central these days is just gone up by a factor of 10. It's now becoming really, if you've got people external to your organization, people on the road, be they salespeople, be they service engineers, be they kind of just people out there generally, then there's a lot of different functions that we're doing for kind of booking appointments or updating core reports, things like that we can do with a Power App, where, for instance, full-blown CRM is not justified or something of that nature. So it's giving us another option, another set of tools in the armory, and Power Apps are really good. The other thing that comes in, Power Apps is not just a mobile app. You have portal apps as well. So in effect, we can create the same type of technique, but actually publish it into a portal that makes it external to your organization. So, which for the first time is making things viable that we've never kind of had the financial justification for doing. So, use an example for that. If you have a vendor that supplies you on a kind of Kanban system, maybe they're bringing in fixings or stationery or whatever you want. In effect, you can publish via the portal your current inventory levels for the items where they're the preferred supplier very quickly using a portal app, Power App published via the portal. So they could log on, see how many you've got, and make sure that they put enough on the van without kind of even bothering you at all. So suddenly the ability to kind of do that for the vendor side, but also specific things around the customer as well. It has suddenly we're not creating a whole portal with a security system and a kind of, it's not a big web development project anymore that's going to be in the tens, if not hundreds of days. It's down in the single figure days probably to get it published and in use.
Okay. So I guess someone listens to this, one of our customers, they decide to go and have a look at something like Power Apps and they start having a play one evening. What I guess the question I've got, how does that impact the relationship with us as the partner? What do we need to be careful of? And what pitfalls can we avoid, or what's the best way of working that way?
Well, I think kind of the citizen developer piece makes partners, the traditional partners, nervous. Okay, and even people within Tecman nervous. If you go and talk to our support team, they'll probably get very nervous because, in effect, they're responsible for keeping your system running, and you're under the bonnet with a set of spanners, not knowing totally what you're doing. So there does need to be some care and control, and that's why probably you don't. What's the phrase? A little knowledge can be dangerous. You do need to understand the risk of what you're doing and just follow certain basic rules. We talked about one of them, which is try out what you're doing in the sandbox. Another one, which is not a bad thing, is actually to get your partner to kind of check what you've done. If I'm going and checking somebody's VS Code route, doing what we call a code review, something we do internally, I can do that code review. I can run through that. It's going to take me 20 minutes, half an hour, probably, to review quite a lot of code. If it's just a page, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to go, yeah, that's fine. Or I'm going to come back and say, I wouldn't have done it that way. You might have a performance impact. I'll give you some comments on that. And I think that's where it's sensible to kind of, before you just throw it into your production system and bring it all crashing down, that's where the partner can add value, just to critique it a little bit and go, yep, that's good to go. That second pair of eyes is where they come in. Clearly, partners, if you do some development work and you break your system, it's a very rash partner that contracts to underwrite that and put it all right at their cost.
Yeah.
So, that's an unreasonable risk to take. So you do need to exercise a little bit of judgment, a little bit of care, and probably talk to your partner about what those rules are being. At Tecman, we've got kind of a set of conventions we would like you to work around, which is leading us down the topic of a whole new podcast that we need to do soon, which is the difference between a full service customer and a self-service customer, that increasingly we're seeing that differentiation between the two.
Okay, so like with any good relationship between a partner and a customer or an end user, communication's key here. Just touch base, what you're planning to do. The partner might save you going down a rabbit hole that's going to cause you lots of problems. And if they're aware of what's going on, of course, they can help you with how we're going to support this, or don't do this because you could do some significant damage to your system. So, okay, that would make
sense. I mean, that from a customer's point of view, clearly you built something, you're really keen to get it in your live system and in use because you spend all this time creating it. You don't want to, you want to get it through. But that's where the partner, if the partner's going to review it, that might not happen precisely when you want it to. There might be a little bit of a delay there, but actually, I think that's the insurance for saying that we're not going to do anything catastrophic that's going to break your systems. There is other things, if you're just reading information out, Liam, you can't break it. You can slow it down, you can hit performance doing that suboptimally, but you can't break anything just pulling information out. If you start posting information back in, you can start to break things, particularly if you put it in the wrong place. But again, that's where the standard APIs don't really let you break anything that you shouldn't. They don't let you post anything that you shouldn't do. You can create some rubbish customers in your system, which is not brilliant, but then you've got the job of going and deleting them if you do that. So go have to tidy up. If you create a custom API yourself and you created that into GL ledger entries, well, your finance colleagues might get a bit annoyed when suddenly your general ledger doesn't balance. But again, you're really going to have to try quite hard to break the rules and do something like that, because just the standard system security, you're going to have to be really, a super user of the highest order of administration before you're allowed to post or edit ledger entry tables. But I'm not saying you couldn't do that, but you'd have to try hard.
Okay. So I guess just wrapping all that up, we would absolutely encourage our customers to look at the possibilities that being a citizen developer and the tools that are out there with things like Power Apps, the benefits that can bring to their system. Always work with your partners so they're aware of what you're doing. They can probably give you a bit of guidance and help, point you to some resources that might help you as well. But generally, we think this is a great thing to continue adding functionality and benefits of using Dynamics as the core products that we've been putting into businesses for many years. Absolutely, and from a Tecman perspective, we're launching kind of specific training courses which are orientated towards these people who perhaps want to do a bit themselves, as much themselves as they wanted to do. We've already done that on a one-to-one basis with several organisations, and actually it's been quite eye-opening to how self-sufficient we've been able to make those organisations quite quickly. So I think that's definite trend of it's not going to be for everybody. A lot of organisations are still going to want, I don't have time to learn this, and there is a bit to learn. But for other organisations, certainly where they have an IT team internally, it makes good sense that
utilize knowledge and skills you already have, and we just, in effect, make it applicable to Dynamics.
Okay, well, if there's anything else you want to add, James, I'll let you. I'm sure you will. But from my point of view, as always, I've learned a load again. And I said that phrase makes complete sense. And I think as we've said already a few times, as customers rely on this software so heavily, it's great that they take a more personal approach to it and can do things themselves to help get more and more out of the systems that we're putting in. But thank you, as always, for contributing to the podcast. I look forward to having a chat with you again about something different in the world of Dynamics. But unless there's anything else you've got to add, I'll thank you and catch up with you soon.
No, it's always a pleasure, and enjoyed doing it, and look forward to seeing you soon.